Hey, hey, hey. What is up, y'all? Welcome back. We are here for another episode of Our Birth Stories. Today, I am super excited because I have a very special person who is joining us today. And before I bring her on and let her introduce herself, I definitely just want to just remind you all like, again, this is Our Birth Stories, a lunchtime chat series that I started last week, right? Where I would invite mothers to come on, Black mamas to come on and just kind of share their story of pregnancy and childbirth. Oftentimes because it's just not talked about enough. And so, of course, after my experience with preeclampsia, um, it just dawned on me like we absolutely need those spaces that we can share and we can just be open and honest about our experiences as moms, right? As women who's giving birth. And so I definitely am excited for this series. We got quite a few more lined up. So this is probably going to go on throughout Preeclampsia Awareness Month. But today is Earth Day. So it's fitting that we have our guest on here for today because she is, all things holistic and just absolutely amazing. Not only is she an author, but the way that she approaches healing for mothers who have given birth via C-section is amazing, y'all. Like it's so amazing because that's another thing that we don't necessarily talk about a lot. It's about, how we've had C-sections and what that recovery process was like. It could have been very traumatic. In my case, it was extremely traumatic. So, just to hear someone kind of standing in the gap for us and someone who is, just kind of fighter for moms who experienced traumatic childbirths and, just had a hard time healing, right? Because as we know, it takes time. And so to have somebody kind of standing in the gap and speaking up for us is so amazing. So without further ado, I do want to introduce you all to Miss Laura, Dr. Laura, actually. I'm going to bring her on stage. Bring her on camera because I want her to introduce herself and really just tell us all what she does and how she just came up with this amazing process for healing and why is it specifically for mothers who have had C-sections. So I'm going to bring her on.
Hi, Fatia.
Hey, Laura, how you doing,
I'm
girl?
doing well. I'm so excited to be with you today. Can I just say
I
that? Can I get that
know.
out? Because I'm chipmunk smiling. And if you know me, when I smile with my eyes closed, it's because I'm very excited. So thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Absolutely. And well, it's a pleasure to have you here because when I started the whole series, I was like, I got it. This will be perfect because I know we've been talking already for like
Yeah,
ever, right?
forever.
About
Yeah,
about getting together and just especially with the new book coming out, like this is like the perfect time. And
perfect
so
time.
I'm happy that again it's Earth Day. So you will get a chance to really even dive into all of your herbs and things. Like we're
Yes.
gonna talk about all the stuff, right?
Yes, yes, yes. So I heard you start by telling me that you want me to introduce myself and what I
Mhm.
do, right? So I
Absolutely.
will start by saying my name is Dr. Laura Zamor. I'm a board certified doctor of naturopathy and I'm a certified holistic health practitioner. And what that means in plain speak is I teach about the body, the 11 systems of the body with non-invasive approaches. So we're talking nutrition, lifestyle counseling, herbalism. My particular focus is in something called iridology, which is the study of the iris and understanding patterns and
Mhm.
weaknesses when it comes to our individual constitution. So I really focus as part of my practice with iridology, TCM, which is traditional Chinese medicine, which is physical observations. So when I work with clients, I look at the physical presentation. Are you dehydrated? Are you in need of sleep? Is there fear going on? So we look at the tongue, the nails, the eyes, the face, and any other physical presentations, the gait, the stance. So that's TCM, physical observation. And then, of course, the herbalism, which I work with herbs and just the physical constitutions, the humors of the body to support moms. I support everybody. People always ask me, do you only support moms? No, I support everyone. I have elder patients, I have young patients, but my focus, where my breath is with us mothers. And so I have the apothecary. It's called Kai Gun Apothecary, in ode to my late grandmother, Tigun. And so through that, I really focus on nourishing, replenishing, rebuilding herbs for the body, just so that moms can really replenish depletion post-birth. And so my practice, again, is virtual. I see clients virtually at this time. And yeah, that's it.
Yes. So all of these things, well, first of all, I want to just kind of tap into like how is it that you chose this field to work with us? I'm gonna say us.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because I can say two things. Number one, I'm a words girl. I'm a language girl through and through. So words and comms, communication is my primary basis, right? So I
Mhm.
function in the space of how do we break down big concepts? How do we understand through language? So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is I've always had an empathic nature. I don't want to say I'm the crunchy one, but for Earth Day's sake, everybody has always labeled me the earthy one, or she always knows the teas, etc. I've always been like that, but I think I've always had a very empathic, intuitive, sensitive nature. And so even with the way that I took care of myself as a teenager, I was an athlete. I played soccer. I played all the sports, name it. And so taking something called Clean Start, which was a colonics, a gentle 2-week, 15-day detoxification process through a company called Nature Sunshine. I don't know if anyone's familiar with it, but that was really my first introduction into taking care of my personal self with these types of holistic based products. So it gave me more energy. I was more focused as an athlete. For me, in terms of switching into the naturopathy as my vocation, as my now practice, really came from the birth. And I think it has a lot to do with me coming from an approach of non-invasive care. Again, being a sensitive. Now these words are like, you hear them every day, but think about it, Tia, like when we were growing up, that was not something that was even
At all.
acknowledged and or celebrated. You were kind of just like, you're the weird one, or you're always sensitive about something. But for
Mhm.
me, it really informed the way that I wanted to rebuild my body. So I had the knowledge around me. I was surrounded by men who are somewhat giants in the field of naturopathy for us as a community of Black people, but really just understanding and then making it something personal for myself. So that's really what led me into working with us in this particular way. Yeah.
Got you,
Yeah.
got you. And it's so amazing how things come full circle
Yes.
because like even when we talk about back when we were growing up, but just rewind even like 10, 15 years ago, like there was
Right.
not like this big emphasis on, healing. I'm gonna just say
Right.
healing in
Yes.
general,
In that
right?
way.
We
Yes.
hear more about it now, but back then, and definitely not like naturopathy, where we're
Mhm.
doing things holistically, and
Right.
and really thinking about like non-invasive types of healing and care. Like we were
Right.
not talking about that, at least not in my immediate community.
Right.
So
Right.
just to even have this as an option now, right?
Mhm.
And just
Yes.
have,
Options.
options, exactly. And just to be
Mhm.
able to have these options is it's an amazing thing.
Yes.
And I know we're going to talk a little bit about like the C-section mamas and how all of this
Right.
kind of play. But before I want to get started into kind of like your own personal journey as well. And I want to talk about your childbirth and just kind of get your experience, and then we can kind of tie it all in together. So the first
Absolutely.
thing I want to ask is, what was your experience like growing up and like hearing
Mhm.
stories about childbirth and
Mhm.
motherhood? Like, what was that experience like for you?
Well, it's so funny that you asked two things you said, like standing in the gap and the warrior or the fighter. Like that really took me back because I've always been labeled like the big mouth one or the one that's always like, somebody needs defending, like go talk to Laura. And it's not something that I chose, but it just, to me, I can't stand injustice, or I can't stand like people overpowering or dominating in there's no right way to dominate someone. But what I'm saying is like, I don't like to see people not be able to walk in their own autonomy. So
Right.
that's just who I am as an individual. But then like to see that in the space of birth. So growing up, there wasn't much dialogue, to be quite honest. And hi, mom, if you're watching, right? But there was not much dialogue about birth, and it was more books. You know, in the
Yeah.
Haitian community, there's like l'école, l'église, lakai. So you're what they call wabat betla. You're studying. You know, there's more focus on that. More focus on the cultivation of that. So there was no dialogue. Maybe you might have heard that someone enceinte, someone's pregnant, you know, someone's going to have a child. You heard those kind of conversations. But for us growing up, it was like, c'est pas business timoun. It's not a child's place. It's not your conversation, you know? So I may have heard about it. I may have witnessed cousins through postpartum, but it wasn't something that was really head on for me until I had my own birth. Honestly, it wasn't.
And that's really like on par, because I think everybody who's been on the series so far has said the same thing. It's like,
and that's crazy, right?
Yeah, it is crazy. Absolutely. Because I'm like, so where do we kind of get this? And that's my next question is like, you know, when you did start to, you know, start your family and you were pregnant, like what kind of expectations did you have if we never had those conversations or knew, you know, knew what to look for or anything? Like, what was your expectation when you got pregnant?
Honestly, like, so first and foremost, so my husband and his family, like the Haitian perspective, and I'm going to refer to that a lot, guys, but it's important because I think family dynamics plays a very big part, especially culturally, for the mother. And so a lot of times we can leave that part out of the care equation, but how you move as a family of origin, how you move as a tribe really is going to influence a lot of your experience. At least that was for me. So I have a husband who was pretty involved, and I wouldn't say it's not that he knew more than me, but was very attentive and very culturally traditional. So when I was pregnant with my first son, I had a lot of, I want to say complications, but gestational illness is not something that my mother suffered from. My mother, lineally speaking, number one, we're not a lineage that reproduces. So it's one mother, one child, one mother, one child. So that's the first thing. So even for me being pregnant, having a gestational illness that was brand new, like nobody even knew what hyperemesis gravidarum, so speak for the first pregnancy, nobody even knew what hyperemesis gravidarum was. And this was in 2014. And I think the first time we'd ever heard of it was Princess Kate. And that's the only thing that I could relate it to. But I could tell you, Fatia, because I had it both times, it's the worst experience ever. So basically you're bedridden, and it felt like a gas that wouldn't pass. That's what it initially starts to feel like, a gas that won't pass. And when it finally passes, the vomiting never stops.
Wow.
Ever. So I was already in a master's program at that time. And of course, they thought I was like playing games, like thought I was faking. You know, I could not continue with my master's program because it required me to get on the train to New York City. I couldn't smell anything. I couldn't do anything. So thereby became the weight loss. So I lost weight immediately, developed ketones in my urine immediately. Like I was bedridden in that pregnancy from, I say September, October, because that's when I stopped my master's program, all the way until December, like 16-ish. Wow. And I remember because I had a friend of mine, his birthday is on December 25th. And that's the first party that I had attended in that span. So I was bedridden the entire time, couldn't wash my hair, couldn't eat. My husband would make me Aunt Jemima whole grain pancakes every day at 1 p.m. and Jewish rye bread. Those are the only two things. I couldn't do the crackers. I couldn't drink water. I couldn't drink juice. I had Now Later, you know, the candies.
Candy.
Yes, Starburst, things like that. I lived off of that until about the middle to end of my second trimester. So I began to eat normally, things of that nature. And I was on medication like nauseating control, but nothing worked. That's another thing. So I do express like my sincere feelings for moms who are navigating HG, because now everyone knows what HG is. But at that time, people just thought I was exaggerating. Then by the end of the pregnancy, I developed preeclampsia, which was another thing that my lineage knew nothing about. Right. And so a lot of the times, thank God for my practitioner. I love her to death. I send her, you know, Christmas, happy birthdays, because she's literally a part of our family. And she's from Pakistan. And her care for us as a couple, as a family, she was the first one to pick up that I was developing the preeclampsia. So I
Mm.
had the monitors, checking my blood pressure. And the ironic thing for me, Tia, and what really caused me to really take this advocacy turn is that people kept focusing on my diet. And I wasn't eating fatty foods. I wasn't, and I speak with that type of language because, yes, high salts, there's certain types of things that should not be in the diet, but stress. And I don't think that as a community, because, we'll lean on faith or we're not allowed to express our emotions, we're not talking about stress. And the
Yeah.
number one thing, like in naturopathy speak now, like the number one thing that stress does is it affects the enzymes in your liver. And it
Mm.
just overstimulates your liver chi. And I don't think that people were talking about that or put the two and two connections. And if you were to say that you're stressed out, then it's like, is your husband stressing you out? It was like, no, I'm a first time mom. I had to drop out of my master's program. I had to ask permission. And even when I did that at that time, the people were asking me, like, the people in care were like, so you rather pursue your master's degree than have this baby? And I'm thinking to myself, I don't even know if I can get out the program. Like, I don't know if I can get out the program because my chairs, my department chairs, they didn't tell me that there were laws in place, right, as part of your
Mhm.
master's program that you could actually leave. So it took a lot of twists and turns, a lot of really just, prayer and relying on my faith that I had this baby at the right time, etc.
Yeah.
So that's my first delivery. But I had a vaginal birth and it was a very powerful experience for me. And it was good. That was the first birth. I don't know if you want
Okay.
to move on to the
Yeah,
second one.
no. I would like to hear more, but the first thing I want to go back to really quick, when you spoke about say the term again. I just want to make
The
sure that it's clear.
hyperemesis gravidarum,
Okay,
HG.
hyperemesis gravidarum,
Yes.
HB. Got you.
Yes.
Okay. So when you say, so you're saying from the beginning of your pregnancy to almost the end of the second trimester is when you experienced the
Yes.
HB.
Yes. And
Okay.
we were warned, like as many mothers are, that I may have had to terminate the pregnancy if it didn't
Mm,
stop because of
wow.
the effect it was having on my body.
Yeah.
So I was getting IV, treatments
Hmm.
for water because I couldn't stand, I couldn't do anything. I was emaciated, to be quite
Wow.
honest. So, that's how it had its effect on me.
Got you. Got you.
Yeah.
Got you. Okay. So moving into your second child, your second pregnancy, how far apart are your
I have Irish
precepts?
twins. So one
Ah,
is, yeah, so
oh,
one
okay.
is April.
Uh-huh.
One is April, and then the other one is December. So they're about like a year and a half, not 2 years
Okay.
exactly. Yeah.
So,
Apart.
and what was that like when you were you planning the second pregnancy to be close, or this was not planned?
No, actually, it's so funny because, and I don't want, again, not trying to be in this ethereal mindset, but like I had a vision, right? I had a vision that I would have this child because we miscarried between the two. And
Mm,
so I was still grieving that and not paying attention, but just it wasn't part of me planning out like, okay, I'm going to have at this time. So when we did get pregnant with him, I was nervous in the beginning because I said, am I going to have this HG business again? Because I was really in the middle of my school counseling role. I had managed to go back and finish the master's program. I graduated. But even in that, saying that I went back, I went back pregnant with him. And so I
mm,
was, again, we're talking about us as a community, women and family planning. For me, it was kind of like, I don't want to get sick again. Please, I don't want to get sick again. And I got sick again pretty
mm.
quickly. And so
With HG.
with the HG
Oh
again,
wow.
with the
Okay.
HG again. And so I don't know if it's something, I know that they're doing a lot of research in terms of whether it's hereditary, etc.
Mhm.
But I had it again. And this time I had to leave work again, resign from my position because I needed to be on bed rest. And this time I had again the IV treatments and all of it, but it stopped earlier for this particular pregnancy. For the second pregnancy, it stopped much earlier. But I just really safeguarded. So that pregnancy was like very quiet. A lot of people didn't, in my immediate surroundings, didn't know that I was pregnant, but that's just because we didn't want to enter a preeclamptic state. We just
Yeah.
were very, very calm and quiet. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you think back to your second pregnancy, after you kind of got past the HG, how was the pregnancy moving forward from there? Like, was it a smooth pregnancy? Tell me about that.
Okay, so for the second one, in comparison to the first, like the first one, it was more or less once we got past the HG and I could eat and I can do all the things, I felt good about it. And the second one was the same thing. Once we got past the HG and knew that I was okay, um, it was good. It felt wonderful. Like you're thinking of all the things that you're doing, you're planning, and it was very much a pregnancy that I was nesting and quiet in, at least for the first and second. But I developed polyhydramnios.
Oh,
So polyhydramnios, again, I don't know why I would be part of the first or the 1% or 2%, but then I developed polyhydramnios. So polyhydramnios in plain speak is a water condition where you're developing fluid in the I believe it's the amniotic sac, but you're just developing an abundant amount of water. And what that did to my body is it just put an excessive amount of weight for
mm,
me. Like it gave me a lot of back pain, a lot of nerve pain. And the baby himself, he was developing perfectly fine. So meeting all his benchmarks. But for me, the water weight was something that became great concern. And obviously, because I had the HG, the first pregnancy, and because I had the preeclampsia, they already put me on, high alert or high risk. That's what became known. And I wasn't with the same practitioner. So that's something also to keep in mind,
mm,
is that I did switch because at the time, my beloved first one, she was pregnant herself. So that, even though the pregnancy itself was quiet in the beginning, those subtle changes really were a bit stressful because I had to get adjusted. We're not talking about the book yet, but this is really the basis for that, is the switch of care. And the
mm.
fact that I was no longer with a one-to-one like I was for my first pregnancy, but now as part of a group. So
Got
that
it.
was a different
Mhm.
experience as well, too.
Yeah.
That was it.
Okay. And when we think about like just the journey, well, with the second pregnancy, was it a natural birth or a cesarean?
The second one was the cesarean.
The
Yes.
cesarean. Got you. Got
Hmm.
you.
Yeah.
So did you have a birthing plan? I know we talked about that in the previous two episodes about having a birth plan in place. Was that
Right.
plan followed? Tell me a little bit about what your birthing plan was if you had one.
Well, honestly, no, I didn't have a birthing plan, but for both children, I just knew I wanted to have them both vaginally.
Mm,
Like the first child, we just wanted to focus on rebuilding my health. So even the birth plan with the first practitioner was really just getting my weight up, eating, nourishing the body, and then with the preeclampsia kicking in, keeping my blood pressure and my stress levels down. And
wow.
so we went right into that birth, and that was that. The postpartum experience, that was that. It was good and gravy. But the second one, the most important aspect of that birth or that pregnancy journey was to stay calm. So no stress, because we were aware that stress was the factor
Yeah.
that led to the preeclampsia, not the diet, right?
Mm,
So I traveled a lot and just stayed mum for the most part, but there was no particular thing that I had put in place. No.
got you.
Hmm.
Um, if you had to look back on your pregnancies, would there be anything that you would do differently? Like, I know you learned a lot about what could happen during pregnancy, but if you
Yes.
could do something different, what would that thing be?
One of the most important things that I wish I had done was take more pictures. I definitely say that. Like I did have, like, your traditional pictures that me and my husband took and things of that nature, but just in general, I think with my second pregnancy, because it just felt pretty foreboding, and I know we'll get to that, like I was just very protective of it. And so I wasn't out and about. I wasn't all doing things that regular pregnant women do. Some pregnant women work until they're ready to deliver. And for me,
Mhm.
those just were not my experiences. So I could say that I wish I had more fun.
More
I wish
fun.
that was possible, that I could have more fun.
Yeah. And that's true, right? Because I mean, when we think about being pregnant, and everybody have their own experiences, but
Right,
especially if, a large part of your pregnancy you spend, you know, on bed rest or you can't
right.
really move around, you want to try to just be extra careful. Like it's hard to have fun. Like, you can't
Exactly.
really do it. So
Right.
that makes sense. And you absolutely, when we talk about stress levels, we kind of,
Mhm.
I think about, you want to engage in the things that you enjoy. You want to be able
Right,
to go and do, all of the things that will make you happy and, and reduce
right,
your stress, right?
right.
Ultimately. So I can definitely understand that. Now, when we talk about you as an author, I want to first talk about your first book,
Okay.
which I have in the shop, by the way, too. So
The
that
audacity to
was
finish. Yeah.
so I want to talk about what inspired you to write the book. Like, talk to us a little bit about, what was the intent for the book when you wrote it.
Right. So for the audacity to finish, it was really about the coming of age into motherhood. I had gone through a lot of different things in my undergraduate experience, including like a spiritual attack. And I did describe what that feels and what that is in terms of like understanding it from the perspective of a mental health issue or how it's depicted, and basically giving people an understanding of not giving up, resiliency. So really seeing what a problem is, knowing what the solutions were, and watching someone work through it.
Mhm.
And part of that part of my life, feeling like it, knowing and feeling like it was such a transformative first part of, my young life, I really wanted people to see that and be able to understand that whatever challenges that they come up, whether it is a first time pregnancy and experiencing HG and not knowing anything about it, whether it is fighting for a master's program, self advocacy was really the basis for the audacity to finish. And even the title, the audacity, sometimes you just have to dig your heels in, and it may not happen right away, but it was very much a first person narrative on something that happened to one person and what they did to overcome it. And I always
Mhm.
am clear about that and saying it wasn't a how to. That book was not a how to. It was really just like a testimony to explain that this is what happened. So I really go through that. For the second book, my journey in writing both of them, this one became more of a guide, more of a how to, because of the experiences that I had been through. And I also felt like there's not enough understanding about our bodies, like how we started the beginning of our conversation. And even in the first two lives, because I've been watching them, they were wonderful. I really enjoyed them. But I just knew that there was not enough understanding about our bodies. There was not enough understanding about, okay, how does the endocrine system work? Or
Mhm.
why am I so anxious? What does that mean?
Mhm.
It's not just I'm not sleeping. Moms don't sleep for like 5 years. We make jokes about it, but what does that mean? And how do
Yeah.
I stay calm when I have an older child? How do I move through these different spaces? What are my resources? How do I have autonomy? Right? Those were the precipice for me writing the second book. So that was the slight, not slight, but subtle difference between my approach with writing both of them.
And that's true. I will say that. And I think that's that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this series, because then, you know, women can see like there are so many different types of pregnancies and so
Yeah,
many experiences
100%.
you can have and not know what is what, right? Like, as
Right,
just kind of moving through things. And like you said, okay, I'm feeling anxious, or even depression. That was one that like
mhm,
came up a lot, right? Like the
right,
perinatal depression,
right,
not even really know that it's depression and not knowing what is it stemming from, like what is the cause of this?
right,
How do I deal with this? And how do
right,
I even explain it? Right. Because that was
right.
another thing that we kind of spoke about, is like, I have these feelings, I have these thoughts, but who am I going to tell and how am I going to explain what this actually feels like?
Feels like, yes,
Mhm. Exactly.
100%. And it's so interesting that you say that. And for me, in writing the Whole Mother Method, it was very important to provide options. And so even when we use certain words like to describe our experiences, like what happens when a woman has a traumatic birth? Do we jump from one experience to another definition? What about everything in between? What
Mhm.
about the mom who's not necessarily what they would say clinically suffering from depression? She may just be really angry,
Mhm.
or she may just be really disconnected, not necessarily the full blown descriptor, but what is the role of her actual physical body in that context, right? So
Mhm.
what's happening in her brain, but not just in her brain. What about the rest of the organs? What's happening in her gut? What's happening with the ability to let go of things? Or what's happening with the ability to express anger that's in the liver? What's happening with brokenheartedness? Like the cover of the book really is that's a piece of artwork that I designed because it demonstrates broken pieces of your heart and
Mm-hmm.
what it looks like to buffer those pieces to create something new. And
Yeah.
so we don't talk a lot about those emotions. We kind of just like run from, and that's not to
Yeah.
discredit for someone who has a clinical diagnosis or is seeking ways to find treatment, but it's really like providing a way for people to have options.
Yeah.
So if you've tried one way and it may not have worked in the past, or that way may have traumatized you to begin with, do you not seek help? Do you not seek assistance? What are your other options? And so that was one of the reasons why I wrote the Whole Mother Method in the way that I did too. I give you in the beginning part the foundation for my experience so that a mom can see herself and understand, wow, that happened to me, or wow, I didn't know that, or wow, that's exactly what I would have said. And
Mm-hmm.
then what are the stages to move through that? We don't have to stay in that place of brokenheartedness. We need to acknowledge it, right?
Right.
We need to set eyes on it. We need to explore it, and in a way that makes sense. What about moms who do have other children? You still have to be fully present, fully functioning. If you have a husband, if you're married, like I was married, and what is the role that the wife takes on? What's the role in the partnership? So even in the book describing what this type of birth does to an entire family matrix, not just the mom, but her husband too.
Yeah.
What happens to that family dynamic in a way that was really, really intimate? That was important for me to share. And then the process by which, we talk about the rest, the replenish, and the reevaluate.
Hmm. So
Yeah.
this, and it's absolutely, I mean, it's a real method that, because the thing is, like, healing is always going to look different for everybody.
Yes.
However, once again, we only know the things that we've kind of been taught or the things that we've
Yes.
researched. So, even now talking about therapy, right? Or being
Yes.
able to address certain things via therapy, it's still something we're like unpacking and getting people to normalize and to
Yeah.
really have the conversation about it's okay not to be okay. It's
Right.
okay to have these different emotions and not know what they are. But how are you going to move through it if we can't acknowledge it? We can't talk about it. And
Right.
then that just adds another layer of stress when you're talking about being pregnant, as we already
Yes.
know, like it's such a fragile time. So if we're not able to really process through what it is that we're feeling emotionally,
Mm-hmm.
it's just a lot of stress on the body. And like you say, then the organs start to be affected, right?
Yes.
And then our functioning really kind of minimizes because we don't know how to express ourselves.
Absolutely. And we don't have it. We don't,
Mhm.
as a mother, you're a nurturer. Like everything flows from you as mom. That's the ideal, but then you're looking at your environment. So something that I do talk about in the book is, the coping self. And we look at the ways in which your leisure. Are you allowed to have leisure as a mom? How do you feel about taking leisure as part of your healing process? What does it look like for stress management? Someone who lives in New York City is going to deal with stress management very differently than someone who lives in California or in London or in Texas. What are your resources that are, readily available to you that you have access to? A lot of times we hear about the snapback culture and what the physical body looks like, but we're not talking about its necessary functionality. And that was something that was important to me. Like, it's not about just, I need to have a nice midsection. And of course, looks are important. I talk about that. I talk about vanity. I talk about the fact that healing from the C-section birth, I had to cut all my hair off, and start from scratch. I had a low Caesar for a couple of years and I thought I was going to stay with it. But no, we're back to the way that I used to be, and talking
Mhm.
about that process. Like, what does it mean to become beautiful again, to feel
Wow.
nourished, to feel
Yep.
attractive, your clothing? Because as many moms who might be watching this now and later understand, you can really give up on yourself. You can, even in the midst of healing, you can be so
Yep.
locked in on healing that you forget about what it means to feel good in your
Yeah.
physical body. And then also just recreating that image, accepting
Mhm.
that, okay, this is how I looked before, this is how I felt before, but how do I recreate something brand new that I can still feel good about? So that was
Absolutely.
important too.
Wow. My goodness. It's funny when as you're talking, like I'm even just playing my own experience in my head because yes, it was a traumatic childbirth experience or a traumatic birthing experience. However, when I think back and I try to think about, well, what was my process for healing and how did I deal with like all of these things, because it was so much at once.
Right.
It's like now I'm thinking about, like, I literally have to sit down and process, like, well, how did I
What did I
navigate
do?
this emotionally? Like, how did I navigate this mentally? Right. Because I think
Yes.
up until, this point, like, I literally just, it was just like, I guess what I felt like an obligation to just
Yes.
keep moving. And I
Yes.
realized like a lot of moms feel that way. Like I've heard people say countless times where it was like, well, I can't quit or I just can't stop. Like I have to just keep going, because
Yes.
that is the mindset that we've adopted, for so long, is like, I'm just obligated to keep going. Whereas we don't even think about taking a break, or we may have thoughts about quitting, but that doesn't not seem like a viable option. You know
Right.
what I mean? So how do you navigate through all of these different eras of your journey in a healthy way, but not only healthy way, but in a way that um I guess will make sense. I guess what I'm trying to say is like in a way that kind of um allows us to not feel guilty.
Yes.
You
Shameful. That's the word too.
know what
Shame,
I mean?
ashamed. Yes.
Hmm.
Yes, I agree with you, because a lot of it here is another thing. And this is another central point to the book, is our generational experience. So you started off by asking me, did I have any knowledge or understanding, or was it discussed in my family about birth? And again, for many women of our generation that are, grew into motherhood in the presence of social media, that's another ticker,
Yeah.
right? So you're talking about being ingrained with the, I would say, social education that you go to school, you get a good paying job, you secure your final calling, right? And you're producing, you're part of what we call a knowledge economy, right? Where you're either an entrepreneur or you're a contributing member to society. And
Hmm.
so we never have dialogue about what happens when birth smacks you right in the bull's eye and stops that. Because birth is something that's so natural, it's part of who we are. And there's no dialogue about what happens when you are forced to stop,
Yep.
especially as a member of this, research shows knowledge economy, where
Mhm.
every minute there's something that we are producing, where we need to stay afloat. And society looks very different now, especially now, than it did 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Right.
So needing to take a break can sometimes sound like, are you kidding? You don't have the resource, you don't have the ability. For some women, for some families, it's not in their best interest, right,
Right.
to hard stop. So a lot of the book covers that in terms of not feeling ashamed. What does it look like when a family comes together and recognizes what sacrifices need to be made so that the long-term goal is that healing? And
Hmm.
then it's like the time needed. So that's another thing that we deal with in terms of our generational experience as mothers, is that you can turn your phone on now and see something on any social media platform. That doesn't mean that in the next 3 weeks it's going to look the same. So
Right.
sometimes we can internalize that and think that that's real life,
Hmm.
where this process I'm talking about took at least 4 years. You know what I mean? So really putting that into context in language, so that people could understand it, that the hair doesn't grow back overnight. Like I
Right.
lost a tooth from this birth, right? I had discoloration in my lips for a long time. So a lot of my physical features were off. I,
Yeah.
I had a lot of hard time. I had a very hard time gaining weight again because of just the stress of thinking of what needs to be done. And I'm breastfeeding a child and I'm caring for my older child. What does that look like in an everyday?
Mm.
So really giving you the tools to say, okay, this is your central nervous system, and these are the parts that make it, and what foods can you take on a daily basis with consistency and grace and compassion for yourself, where you can keep that part of yourself calm. How do you get up in the morning and put your feet on the ground and not have all these things coming over you about what you have to do, and
Hmm.
not feel guilty about putting your physical, mental, emotional health first, your spiritual health first,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And then understanding, like, okay, this is what's happening to me on an energetic level, not being able to fiscally do what I used to do. How is that impacting my energy levels? How is that impacting my energetic structure? like in the book, I do talk a lot about chakra energy and things, and people can like look weird. But no, we do have, a 7-set system of energy that corresponds to our cells,
Mhm.
corresponds to, the different centers of the body. And this type of birth can sometimes really throw that out of alignment. And so you
Mhm.
can find yourself feeling sad. You can find, a lot of women, I do talk about the throat chakra a lot. And it's that when we suppress the things that have happened to us, and we're talking
Yeah.
about birth and we're talking about postpartum. So we're talking hair shedding. Well, sometimes we can shed more hair than necessary. And
Mhm.
it can take much longer for that hair to grow back. This is just an example, right? Because this is part of our beauty and what we recognize. But we can see some women not able to gain weight properly or
Mhm.
lose weight properly, or the moods are all over the place. So that has a lot to do with our energetic health as well. So
Mhm.
for me, it was really important to include all of that in one concise manner.
Yeah. Man, and y'all have to get the book because and it's on Amazon, or you can tell us, Laura, where else we can find the book. I know it's on Amazon, but
Okay, so
any other places?
yes, it's on bookshop.org. And it's also you can get it generally through bookshop.org. And there's a wonderful woman. She runs a shop called Compass Collective. You can find her on IG as well. So it's through her bookshop as well. And those are independent supporting bookstore resources. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it on Barnes and Noble. You can find it on Walmart.com. You can find it, let me think, Barnes and Noble, I said already, Walmart,
Mhm.
Amazon. You can find it if you're in UK. You can find it through Blackstone. You can find it through Waterstones. Um, there's a couple. I don't know if I'm missing anything right now, but those are the
Okay.
main places that people are telling me, responding to me that they are able to purchase right now.
Nice. And I'm putting that out there because I think it's an excellent book. Even if you're
Thank
gifting it
you.
to somebody who is, thinking about conceiving, who is pregnant, like it's a really, really great read. Not only a great read, but it's therapeutic. Like that was
Thank
the thing
you.
that got me. It was just like, okay, like somebody actually really sat down to conceptualize an entire method for healing for moms.
Yeah.
Like, and when you in the book, like you talk about a lot of different things, but the one thing that I just kept thinking was like every mama can use this. It's not just
Thank you.
like,
Yes.
you don't have to have preeclampsia.
Right.
You don't even have to have a traumatic, pregnancy or childbirth. But
Yes.
it truly is for every mother, like
Yes.
on a healing journey and just kind of going through a lot of the things that we've all experienced, but we just don't
Yes.
speak about. And
Yes.
so it is very helpful. So I just wanted to, I'm gonna also put it in a caption when we finish. But
Okay.
it's a very therapeutic book, y'all. And
Thank you.
it goes deep. And so it's more than just like she said, you know, it's more than just, hey, take a break or, all of those things. It's not surface at all. Again, it talks about the different systems in the body and how it impacts us and what you can do for these. So it's a very, very deep book. So I really think it's for every mama.
Thank
So
you.
um my last question before we, kind of free for all and get ready to go is, what is one piece of advice you would give a Black mama embarking on a pregnancy journey? Like, what piece of advice would you give her?
Wow. Okay. So the first thing that I would speak to her about or advise her to do is to get a doula. I would always advocate that. And even in the book, I do talk about that. Like my particular doula or friend who was a doula is a doula. She was overseas at the time. And so what I want to make clear is that even if the person is not able to serve you right where you are, just having an objective perspective, someone that you can talk to that understands the birth process, understands the systems of birth, that
Mhm.
can speak to you in an advocate role that takes the stress off of you. So I will always advocate for that. The second thing that I would advocate for is speak to your practitioners and really trust what I would say is the energy of your practitioner. It doesn't matter what your practitioner looks like. And I'm
Mhm.
really specific about that because when I talk about the throat chakra, one of the most important things was that what happened with me, and I know we didn't get a chance to go into that too much as part of the introduction, is my practitioner looked like me.
Mhm.
And when we talk about violation, when we talk about things like a birth that could have been prevented. That can send people like, oh, so are you saying that C-sections are bad or whatever? I'm saying that you want to have autonomy. You want to have understanding. You want to know if something is medically necessary. So as a person of language, that's one of the most important things in the book that I talk about is understanding the language being used around you. And if you don't feel comfortable, please ask questions. I cannot stress that enough. Please ask questions and please trust your intuition. And I know that when we're in these systems and we're in these different spaces, you can feel like I'm going to get in trouble. And I'm telling you, because this is how we felt, like even though we have that fighter spirit and, my husband was a great advocate for me and great partner, as a couple, we were scared. I'll tell you honestly. And so many other couples might feel scared too, but it's really important to keep that dialogue going and ask questions. If you don't feel comfortable with a practitioner, regardless of what they look like, get out as early as you can, and be mindful because, your file, and I'm using language very specifically, but your file, everything that follows you will really can really dictate and or influence the experience that you have. So I definitely tell moms not to panic them. Some people are saying that, would you want to give this to a mom who's going to conceive, etc. I don't like to put people in a place of panic. And I also don't want people to feel like the experience that I have is going to be theirs. But if I would say something, I cannot stress enough asking questions and leave if you can, if you don't feel safe. That's the most important thing, because safety is the most important foundation for birth, because it's the most transformative experience. I don't care how prepared you are, especially to my type A mothers who do have plans in place, right? Things change at the blink, right here. So that was a foundation for the book, is really learning how to let go, but still keeping safety as a foundation. You can be flexible, but you need to be safe.
Yeah.
You can listen to people's opinions, but at the end of the day, there should be a clear dialogue between you and who's taking care of you as to what's best for you.
Yeah. Oh, that's so powerful you said that, because even thinking back to when I first got pregnant and I was going to like this practice that I feel like maybe somebody recommended them or something, or they were like one of the popular, practices that everybody kind of knew of.
Right.
And I went there and I probably went to 2, maybe 3 appointments. And I was like,
this is not it.
It's not. And I couldn't pinpoint it like with words. Like I didn't have a language.
It was a feeling.
Like, it was a feeling. Right. It was a feeling. And I remember switching ASAP to a midwifery practice that was so far from my house. But I was like, I'm not staying here. Like, whatever it is, I'm not staying here. So I think when you say that, it's powerful, because I always tell people, like, advocate for yourself, even if you don't have the words or the language, describe the feeling. Like
the
if it's a feeling of uneasiness, or if you don't know where it's stemming from, still vocalize that feeling, because it's
your
so
internal
important.
guidance. It's there for a reason. And I do feel strongly about that, Fatia, because this is what can keep us in unsafe situations.
Yep.
And one of the things that I personally had to make peace with when we're talking about self-expression is I was scared to talk about the birth for a long time. Working through the podcast, how we met and how this relationship blossomed was one of the ways that I, as a communicator, was able to talk to other moms. Like, have you been through this? Like, is this normal? Like, what is your healing process? What is your journey looking like? What are some of the challenges? Because shame is something that can choke you to death.
Yep.
And there can be a thing that happens where everything after that birth, you're thinking of all the things you woulda, shoulda, coulda did when it wasn't even your fault.
Yep.
And so that's one of the biggest things that I do talk about in the book as well. And I would share with, a mother who's preparing TTC, someone who's really in the midst of desiring to have children and saying, well, is this okay? It's wonderful, but preparation is key in that sense. And another thing is too, sometimes you may not be able to have that midwife, right? You may not have that accessibility, or it can be insurance linked. And that's one of the things about the book that I talk about is like the 3D experience. What's your insurance? Where do you live? What's proximity? What does your family think about the choices that you're making? Because these things matter. You can
Yeah.
have, in your family, people who, like you said, you need to go to this practitioner, or all your friends are recommending that spot. And you get
Hmm.
there and you're like the 1% that's like, why am I here? I
Yeah.
don't like how this feels. And you are not able to get out of it. Right.
Yeah.
So it's, those are all the things that I think is really important in terms of self-expression and not feeling bad if you didn't speak up when you should have.
Yeah.
Like for my moms who are postpartum now, could be 20, 30 years. I've met women all over as a result of the book who are just like, this happened way back when, and I should have X. That's the first thing that usually comes out of our mouths. I should have. Like, how do we make peace with that?
Hmm. Oh gosh, that's powerful. I think that's a whole other conversation. Like
Mhm.
even when we talk about just like the postpartum stages and thinking back. And I hope that wasn't like a traumatizing question, like if you could change anything,
Oh
because I
no,
know that there's always like that if you're not
reflective.
healing, but there's always that thought of what could I have done differently, or I should have done this differently
I
when
wish I
like
left the practice. I wish, but again, like that's why I highlight for moms. It's like sometimes it's that systemic thing, or that
yeah,
systematic thing where you can't.
yeah.
And that was my situation. I
Mhm.
couldn't leave the practice that I was in because for them it was considered too late. Speaking to
Mhm.
the doula at that time, we all knew what was up. We all knew this wasn't gonna. I don't want to say this wasn't gonna end well, but this was going downhill fast,
Yeah.
and there was no way for me. Everywhere that we looked, other places just said that I was too far along, things of that nature. So I do wish that I had known to leave earlier, but you think you're in the care of someone that reflects you. So you should stay. That's another thing. Allegiance or loyalty,
Yeah.
you really have to follow this.
Yeah, yeah, I got you. Absolutely. So, Laura, I want you, before, we wrap up, to just hone in on, what you do, where can people find you, and anything that you want, the viewing audience to know about, what you have going on and what's coming up for you.
Absolutely. So as of right now, so I had the copy of the book with me. It's here it is. Here it is. So this is the copy of the book. This is the Whole Mother Method. And as Fatia said, as we said earlier, you can find it on Amazon.com. You can find it on bookshop.org, barnesandnoble.com. And I'm focused on that at the moment. But for virtual consultations, you can find me at www.llhproductionsllc.com. I have a weekly newsletter where I talk all things health and wellness. I talk about all the things, herbs and things that you can do to, restore the body, replenish the body, nourish the body through my apothecary, which is Kai Gun Apothecary. Everything's under one website, so you can find everything and all of me there. But through the apothecary, I have something called rafraîchi. That's something that I kick up during the warmer months, but it's a really nice, cool brew that's made of hibiscus. It's made of peppermint and lavender. Again,
Mhm.
nourishing, cardiovascular, digestive. It's a nice way to mellow out. So I kick that up in the month of June through about September. Otherwise, I have oils and blends that you can use. There's passion flower. That's for the autonomic nervous system. If you're someone who's, dealing with sleep issues, I have something called Rose Herbal Blend, which really speaks to the heart chakra. If you're navigating feelings of brokenheartedness, of, just regret, things that can really slow down your energy. I have something called Lavender Herbal Blend, which again speaks. I really focus, Fatia, I really focus on the nervous system in a natural way, right? So moms who feel depleted, using the oils consistently will help to bring homeostasis to the body. So the apothecary, you can find that. What else? And I think that's about it for right now. My books do open again in the fall. So currently, the clients that I'm working with, that's where I am right now, but the books will open up for new clients in the fall. So just join the newsletter for the weekly information, the free information there, and then you'll find out when the books open again in the fall.
Nice, nice,
Yeah.
nice. And I'm so glad like this is available, right? Because once
Yeah.
again, I mean, we know therapists and we know what therapists do, but to know that specifically, your focus is helping women or, mothers heal, like
Yes.
is almost unheard of, right? And so
Yeah.
I definitely want that to be known. Like,
Thank you
you
so
are
much.
that safe space. So
Thank you so much. And it's really important because I do highlight talk therapy is very important, right?
mhm,
Like I have a foundation in school counseling, so I understand. But giving yourself permission if that's not the only thing you need, or if that's the thing in this season, that's not what
mhm,
you need, something of a more somatic, and helping you to understand that language. What does this mean? If you take this and you bring it back home and you tell your mom or you tell your husband or you tell a sister, right? Your trusted confidant, I think I'm going to go try some Reiki. Reiki who? Like
yeah,
understanding what
yeah,
it does, why, and when is it safe and applicable. Something
mhm,
like, craniosacral therapy, understanding the very, very, very non-invasive approaches to restoring the body in accompaniment with what we already know in terms of yoga therapy and
mhm.
nutrition, and really focusing on food. Like people always ask me, so you're a naturopath, like do you eat? That's the number one thing I get. I eat. I eat,
It is
but we talk about
definitely
the
funny.
right. We talk about the quality of food and
Mhm.
when you're eating and why cravings, especially for us as
Oh
women,
yeah,
how
that's
that's
a big
related
one.
to our emotions, right? So
Mhm.
really just giving that education, that foundation for wellness, for long-term wellness.
Yeah. Good stuff, Laura. Good stuff. Yes,
Yeah.
so I'm so happy we had this conversation. I was glad that you just made yourself available to come on.
Oh, anytime, Fatia. I'm so it's an honor to be with you and all the things that you do for preeclampsia, all the things that you do for juice define, and just
Thank
really
you.
educating the community on the importance of something like juicing and how accessible and how easy. It doesn't have to be
Mhm,
intimidating. And I
mhm.
think that the work that you're doing speaks to the need and the desire, right? Like we
Right.
are helping people in these very, very, I wouldn't say unconventional, but these very accessible ways, and
Yeah.
being well is accessible. It's possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, that was powerful.
Yeah.
I love that. So, all right, y'all. So this was our third episode of our birth stories. As you can see, there's so many different stories and experiences. So you don't have to feel shy or feel any sense of shame about being able to share your birth story, no matter how different it was, because there's always someone who may share a similar experience or could benefit from hearing someone else verbalize their experience so that they know it's okay, to talk about theirs. And that's pretty much what this whole series is about, is being able to just empower other moms to, just share your experience. You never know who can relate. You never
Right.
know who can be healed or start a healing process by hearing a story of someone else.
Yeah.
So I thank you, Laura, for coming again. Like, I know we're gonna do some other amazing things with the book moving forward, because
Yes.
everybody need to know about the whole mother method.
Thank
And
you, Fatia.
so we will definitely talk again really soon.
Okay.
Y'all, I'll put the link for the book in the caption, but I definitely want to highlight that for sure.
Okay.
Any final words, Laura, you wanna
I
share?
just want to say thank you to everyone who's supporting us, who's listening. If you have questions, you can find us. Feel free to subscribe to the newsletter and just stay in contact with us. We're here to
Yeah.
educate and to support. And it's been a pleasure. It's really
Yes,
been a pleasure. Thank you
ma'am.
so much
So
for
we will
having me.
talk soon. Have a good
Yes.
rest of your day.
Thank you so
We'll
much.
talk
You too.
later. All right, Laura.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.